What heartbreaking incident at your child's school could have been avoided? My daughter has been trailed home by the same 3 seniors since she started freshman year 5 months ago, and the school's only reply has been, "Boys will be boys." Well, last Monday, I was eating lunch at work when I got a series of frantic texts from Leia. They're in the girls' bathroom. They're trying to climb into my stall. Please help, Dad. I'm so scared. I knocked my chair over getting up. Phone already dialing the school as I sprinted through the parking lot. Secretary's desk. How can my daughter is in the bathroom? 3 seniors are climbing into her stall. The secretary paused. Which bathroom? I put the key in and started speeding immediately. 3rd floor, I think. I don't know. Just find her. The secretary wasn't speaking. Her name is Leia Clarks. They're attacking her right now. Sir, she started. Unfortunately, the rules state I cannot leave my secretary desk unattended. And the principal is unavailable on her lunch break right now. I practically screamed this next part into my phone. Are you stupid? What are you talking about? Go to the bathroom now. Sir, she said like she was talking to a child. Please refrain from using vulgar language. They're climbing into my daughter's stall. I'll make a note for when the principal returns. I hung up, realizing I was dealing with a human robot. Leia hadn't texted in 4 minutes now. 8 minutes later, I abandoned my car sideways in the bus lane and sprinted through the front doors of the school. The secretary looked up from her computer, mouth opening to speak about sign-in procedures, but I was already past her. I ran to that bathroom faster than I'd ever ran in my life. But when I got to it and went to open it, my worst nightmare came true. It was locked from the inside. The boys must have gotten the keys to deliberately do this. I pressed my ear against the door and I could hear them in there with her. Leia was crying. Her clothing was getting ripped and suddenly her crying turned into muffled screaming, like someone covered her mouth. I threw my shoulder against the door, but these were the new doors they'd installed after the shooting 4 years ago. Reinforced steel frames. The door didn't even shake. Leia, I'm here. I grabbed a chair from the hallway and swung at full force. The chair shattered into pieces while the door stayed perfect. The fire extinguisher was heavier. I hammered it against the lock mechanism over and over, metal ringing through the hallway. But these doors were doing exactly what they were designed to do. By now, the secretary had climbed the stairs, panting and red-faced. Sir, you're destroying school property. I'm calling security. Give me the key, I yelled. She visibly shook at how angry I was. I don't have bathroom keys, sir, she said. Only the principal has those and she's by the time she finished her sentence, I was running to her office. I finally reached it and through the window I saw her at her desk eating a salad while scrolling through her phone. I pounded on her door hard enough to shake the wall. She looked up slowly, held up 5 fingers, mouthed 5 minutes, pointed to her food, and went back to scrolling. That's when the security guard appeared behind me, hand on his radio. Sir, you need to calm down. But I didn't. I picked up another chair. The principal saw me raise it, and her eyes went wide. I swung the chair through her window. Glass exploded everywhere. She screamed, dropping her salad. I reached through, unlocked her door from inside, blood from the glass cuts dripping on her carpet. Sir, stop. The security guard grabbed my arm, but I shoved him off and went straight for her desk, yanking open drawers until I found the key ring. You're insane. The principal shrieked. I'm calling the police. I ran back to the bathroom, keys jingling, leaving bloody handprints on the walls. But when I got there, the door was already open. The boys were gone, and my dear Leia was curled on the floor, her skirt torn, her lips bruised, her hair covered in white sticky liquid, and her shirt unbuttoned and bra torn. I immediately pulled out my phone to call 911, kneeling beside Leia, taking off my jacket to wrap around her when the principal rushed in with the security guard. You assaulted me. The principal's voice was shrill. Jim, he could have killed me with that chair. I was talking to the dispatcher, one hand holding the phone, the other stroking Yela's cheek as she choked out blood and tears. The principal kept going, pacing now, gesturing wildly. You've traumatized my entire staff. She pulled out her own phone. Every student on this floor saw you acting like a maniac. That's 200 children who will need counseling. The security guard was filming everything. This is going to be on the news, the principal continued, now talking to someone on her phone. A parent going psychotic, destroying property, creating an unsafe learning environment. Our insurance doesn't cover parental attacks. The superintendent is going to yes. Hello. She suddenly interrupted herself. We have a violent intruder who threatened me with a weapon. She gave my physical description and described the premeditated assault. She never mentioned the 3 boys or why I did what I did. When the police arrived 4 minutes later, she pointed at me first. That's him, the one who attacked me. 2 officers moved toward me while 2 more pushed past to get to Leia. The first officer put his hand on my shoulder and started guiding me away from my daughter. I tried to explain about the 3 boys, but he just said we'd talk at the station. My hands were still dripping blood from the window glass onto the bathroom floor. The paramedics rushed in with their bags and went straight to Leia, who was still curled up on the cold tiles. They started checking her over, and one of them called for a gurney while I watched from the doorway with the officer's hand still on my shoulder. The principal was already talking loudly to another officer about how I'd gone crazy and attacked her office. She kept pointing at me and using words like violent and unstable while Jim held up his phone to show the video he'd taken. Nobody asked about the 3 boys or why I'd been trying to get into this bathroom in the first place. The paramedics lifted Leia onto the gurney and covered her with a white sheet while she kept her eyes closed tight. I moved to follow them, but the officer blocked my path. He told me I was detained for assault and destruction of property. I watched them wheel my daughter down the hallway while I stood there helpless. The principal kept giving her statement to anyone who would listen while they put handcuffs on me right there in the hallway. Students were watching from their classroom doorways, and some had their phones out recording everything. The officers walked me past all those staring kids, and I caught one last glimpse of Leia on the gurney with a female paramedic holding her hand and talking to her softly. At least someone was being gentle with her while they treated me like a criminal. They put me in the back of the police car and drove me to the station while I kept asking about my daughter, but they just said to save it for the detective. At the station, they took me through the booking process with fingerprints and photos against the white wall. My hands were still bleeding, and they had to clean them before they could get good prints. When they finally gave me my phone call, I didn't waste it on a lawyer. I called the hospital to check on Leia, but they wouldn't tell me anything since I wasn't there in person. All they'd say was that she was examined, and I'd have to come in person for any information. I found out later that a victim advocate had met Leia at the hospital for the SNE exam while I was stuck in that holding cell. This woman stayed with her through the whole process and explained each step so Leia wouldn't be scared. The evidence collection took hours with photographs and swabs and measurements while I sat in custody, not knowing what was happening. They released me that evening with a citation and a court date for the property damage charges. The desk sergeant mentioned something about the principal not pressing assault charges at this time, which made it sound like she was doing me some kind of favor. I practically ran to my car in the station parking lot and drove straight to the hospital. I found Leia in a room on the 3rd floor all cleaned up, but her eyes looked empty, and she flinched when I moved too fast toward her bed. She whispered that I shouldn't touch her, but please don't leave either. I pulled the chair close to her bed so she'd know I was there, but gave her the space she needed. We sat in silence for a while until Detective Paula Norris arrived with her notebook. She spoke to us one at a time, starting with me out in the hallway while a nurse stayed with Leia. I gave her the exact timestamps from Leia's texts and explained how the secretary wouldn't leave her desk and how the principal had held up 5 fingers for his lunch break. Detective Norris took it all down with a neutral expression, though I noticed her jaw tighten when I mentioned that signal. Then she went in to speak with Leia, and though I could hear the murmur of their voices through the door, I couldn't make out any of the words. A discharge planner came by next, carrying a pile of pamphlets about trauma, therapy, and what to expect in the coming days. She talked about safety planning, counseling, follow-up visits, and gave us hotlines to call if we needed support. My head couldn't keep up with all of it, normal reactions to abnormal situations, recovery not being a straight line, coping strategies. None of it stuck. All I cared about was getting Leia home, safe, and figuring out how to handle everything that had just happened, When it was time to leave, the nurse wheeled Leia out while I brought the car around to the emergency exit. I helped her into the seat, and she curled up against the window without a word. We drove in silence for about 10 minutes before she finally whispered, "Don't tell Grandma yet. Or anyone. I can't handle people knowing." I nodded and kept driving. The rest of the way was quiet except for her soft sniffling. At home, I carried her bag inside while she walked slowly to the door. I checked every window and lock, even wedging a chair under the back door handle. Curtains drawn, daylight or not. My phone showed 14 missed calls from the school, but I erased the contact completely. Leia stood in her doorway, staring at her bed for a long moment, then turned and went to the living room instead. I pulled her favorite blanket from the closet and brought it over. She wrapped herself in it on the couch and closed her eyes. Neither of us mentioned school the next day. We both knew she wasn't going back. My phone buzzed with a news alert. My stomach dropped. The school had put out a statement about a violent incident involving a parent, talking about property damage and disruption. Nothing about the assault. The comments were already piling up, labeling me unstable and reckless. Posts spread quickly, strangers adding their opinions about parents who lose control. I turned the phone face down, but it wouldn't stop buzzing. An hour later, Detective Norris called while Leia was dozing. She explained the process would be careful but slow, and assured me Leia would have an advocate present for everything. Her voice was professional, but I could hear a note of empathy. She set our appointment for 2 days later. The next morning, I tried making breakfast, but Leia only picked at her toast before curling back up on the couch with her blanket. 3 days later, we went to the station for her formal statement. The advocate greeted us in the lobby and went in with Leia while I stayed in the waiting area. I sat in that hard plastic chair for 2 hours, watching the clock, people passing in and out. Finally, the door opened. Leia looked drained, but the advocate told me she had done really well. Detective Norris came out and said Leia had been very brave. We went home, and Leia went straight back to the couch. The next afternoon, a process server came to the door with a no trespass order from the school, banning me indefinitely for safety concerns and property damage. The irony made my hands shake. Not long after, a video surfaced online showing me smashing the principal's window, edited to cut out everything leading up to it. The comments were brutal, calling me violent and unstable. I deleted my social media. That night my boss emailed, citing conduct unbecoming and reputation damage. HR put me on leave pending investigation. 2 days later, I met attorney Dimitri Lawson. He suggested arguing extreme circumstances, but warned the principal had political connections. He mentioned plea deals, though I wasn't ready to hear about admitting guilt. Meanwhile, Leia began therapy with Samra Green, who taught her breathing and grounding exercises. It was the first time she seemed a little less afraid. We even stopped for ice cream afterward, trying to feel normal. 3 days later, Cullen Burgess from the district called, referring to everything as alleged. Soon after, certified letters barred the boys from contacting Leia, but she still received a threatening Instagram message. I sent screenshots to Detective Norris, who later called with real progress. Hallway camera footage showing the boys entering the bathroom during lunch, the principal still at her desk. Phone records matched Leia's texts and my calls. The nurse's report was devastating, but it strengthened the case. The custodian also came forward, saying he'd seen the boys with keys they shouldn't have. Then Dimitri called with bad news. The principal had filed for a restraining order against me. We'd have to fight it in court. After 2 weeks, Leia tried returning for one class. But the smell of the boys' cologne triggered a panic attack, and I rushed her home. She cried the whole way, apologizing for being weak. The counselor said setbacks were normal, but it felt like we were slipping backward. At night, I sat with the evidence, phone records, timestamps, medical reports, witness statements. Every piece showed what really happened. Yet the boys still walked free, while my daughter couldn't even walk down a hallway. The district sent more letters about policy reviews, but it was all empty words. I knew they wanted this to fade quietly. I wasn't going to let it. Court dates, lawyer meetings, and endless forms piled up while Leia stayed home trying to heal. The system that should have protected her had failed, and now we were fighting for basic justice. 3 days later, Dimitri told me the DA offered a plea: misdemeanor property damage, probation, and paying for the principal's window. He urged me to accept, saying it would keep focus on Leia's case. I signed. Even though admitting guilt felt wrong, the district proposed safety measures for Leia, schedule changes, escorts, and a private bathroom, but I pointed out all the gaps. A few days later, one of the boys' fathers confronted me in a parking lot, blaming me for ruining his son's future and threatening lawsuits. My dash cam caught everything, including his admission that his son had gotten carried away. That same day, the district emailed parents, calling it a student conflict and praising their quick response. I drafted a detailed timeline of what really happened, though Dimitri cut the harshest parts. Detective Norris later shared that the boys' stories contradicted each other badly. One denied being there, another claimed consent, and the third blamed the others. She said those inconsistencies helped our case. CPS also visited our home, which felt invasive, but ended with useful resources and support. 3 weeks into therapy, Leia finally slept through the night. We quietly celebrated with blueberry pancakes. Then Norris uncovered the principal's phone records, proving she ignored calls during lunch. The damage to her credibility was done, but harassment continued. A cruel note was left in Leia's locker, and the school reluctantly added cameras. At the restraining order hearing, the judge issued mutual stay-away orders, calling out both my window breaking and the principal's delay. Dimitri said this actually helped, since the principal couldn't easily testify against me. A few days later, Cullen Burgess admitted in a closed-door meeting that the school had ignored Leia's earlier reports about being followed home. The district wanted to avoid a federal complaint and offered mediation, pushing forms for counseling funds and policy changes if we agreed not to sue. That same day, Dimitri called. Another girl had come forward with nearly the same story about the 3 boys. Her account showed the school should have known. Detective Norris built a massive case file with statements, timelines, and footage, and after 10 days, the DA filed assault charges against 2 boys and sent the youngest to juvenile court. Meanwhile, my own plea deal came due. Admitting guilt for breaking the window burned, but Dimitri said probation and community service would help Leia's case, so I signed. The Title IX investigation ended with the boys pulled from campus to online classes, Leia getting a tutor, and the principal on leave. It looked good on paper, but felt hollow. At the preliminary hearing, Leia testified. The defense tried to rattle her, but she held on, saying afterward that facing them made her feel stronger. A local paper then ran a major investigation using our story, sparking board meetings and parent demands for change. Work punished me with a 2-week unpaid suspension and an improvement plan, but at least I kept health insurance. The suspension let me take Leia to a survivor support group. She came out red-eyed but lighter, saying I survived. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. Days later, the district's lawyers offered mediation, full coverage of therapy, outside experts to review protocols, and mandatory staff training. They still wouldn't admit fault, but Dimitri said securing Leia's care mattered most. I signed, hands shaking with everything left unsaid. The counselor suggested Leia start with 2 morning classes, with a quiet room if needed and an escort between buildings. We practiced the route beforehand, marking safe spots. On Monday, she walked in shaking, but made it through both classes, using the quiet room twice. When I picked her up, she was exhausted but proud, so we celebrated with ice cream. Weeks later, the district quietly reassigned the principal to an office job. One boy took a plea deal with treatment and restraining orders, which made Leia feel safer. The other 2 kept fighting charges. Around the same time, she picked an oak tree at the garden center. We planted it together, and every morning she watered it faithfully, a small thing she could control. Months crawled by: therapy, part-time school, endless court delays. Then one evening, while making spaghetti, she laughed at one of my dumb jokes. just for a second, but it was real, like the old Leia. Now she's doing homework across from me, back at school part-time, sleeping better and slowly healing. We're not over what happened, but we're living with it one day at a time. And for now, that's enough.